What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Primetime Sports Podcast, hosted by Joey McLaury. So today is the third football Sunday of the NFL season. Going to just break down some of the headlines from Week 2 with a few performances and also some games that stood out from that slate. So let's start out with Daniel Jones. I talked about him after Week 1, where he had a great Week 1 against Miami. And then in Week 2, Daniel Jones followed up that great performance with another great one. He went for 23 completions in 34 attempts, 316 passing yards against Denver last week, a passing touchdown and a rushing touchdown, in a 29-28 win for Indianapolis over Denver. That was Daniel Jones' first 300-yard passing game since 2023. He just seems so much more confident standing in the pocket and delivering downfield throws into tight windows. That was something that I wanted the Giants to do more with them, but it just seems like he was always hesitant and afraid to make a mistake. But with Shane Steichen, credit to Shane Steichen, he's letting Daniel Jones play to his strength, which is the deep ball, throwing the ball downfield, and also using his mobility, and that's just really worked for that Colts offense to begin the year. They got Jonathan Taylor, who I think is the best running back in the game. I think he's top 3, but I think this year he has the best year of running backs in the NFL. I said that in my predictions. I thought he would have a top 3 running back season. I think when you look at it, a lot of people would still take guys like Saquon Barkley, maybe Jahmyr Gibbs over him, but I think he does have the best year out of running backs in the NFL this year. He's been awesome. Tyler Warren, as I said, I thought he'd be a top 5 tight end day 1 in the NFL. He's been really good to start the year. And then Daniel Jones has other good weapons too. A.D. Mitchell's pretty good. Josh Downs, who hasn't really done too much yet, but he's good. Alec Pierce. They got some talent on that team. Michael Pittman Jr. as well. There is some talent around him, especially offensively, and then the defense has some players as well, but the offensive line's good, and then Steichen is a great play caller for Daniel Jones. So that offense has really been booming to begin the year. The Broncos' defense is good, and they were trying to blitz Daniel Jones to put pressure on him, but he just kept responding. 268 passing yards versus the blitz last week against Denver, with 2 big-time throws against the blitz, 0 turnover-worthy plays, and a 116.8 passer rating against the blitz. Very, very impressive. And just to put it into perspective, you can compare Daniel Jones' numbers to some of the other top quarterbacks in the NFL through 2 weeks, and Daniel Jones is right at the top of the list. He has had an awesome start to the year, and I know Josh Allen did just play on Thursday night, so some of these stats are obviously going to be different now, but heading into Week 3, Daniel Jones only had 15 less total yards than Josh Allen, with 1 more total touchdown, 5% better of a completion percentage, and a 111.1 passer rating versus Allen's 98.4 passer rating. And I know stats are not always showing the full picture, but this is very, very impressive, and it obviously shows that his excellent start to the season is something that he should be praised for. It isn't just, Daniel Jones only had 1 good game. Now he's put together 2. If he puts together another one against Tennessee, which he has a favorable schedule somewhat coming up, if Daniel Jones is able to do this week after week for the next couple weeks, he's going to get himself a lot more respect in the game, and he deserves it. And Allen now has better numbers than that since he did play in Thursday Night Football. But Daniel Jones has had an exceptional start to the year, which is why comparing numbers to Josh Allen proves his elite stats, and it just puts things into perspective with how much Daniel Jones has balled out to begin the year. And Daniel Jones is a guy I've always been very high on, always been very confident in him, so I'm very happy to see him doing big things to begin the year. He's so far the highest graded quarterback through the first 2 weeks. He has a plus 0.35 expected points added per dropback, a 71.4% completion percentage, which is 6th best in the NFL, 588 total for his passing yards, which is 2nd best in the NFL heading into Week 3, with 5 total touchdowns, with a 111.1 passer rating and an 80.9 quarterback rating, which is 9th best in the league. His connection with Tyler Warren is exactly what I expected. Like I said already, I expected Warren to be a top 5 tight end in the game right away. He's so far heading into Week 3. He had 155 yards, which was first among tight ends through 2 weeks. 92 yards after the catch, first among tight ends through 2 weeks. 3 contested catches, first among tight ends within the first 2 weeks, and also 0 drops. He has been awesome. The Colts became the first team in NFL history to score in their first 10 possessions to open a season. Starts where the Colts had 0 punts and 0 turnovers. There was only one time during Peyton Manning's entire tenure with the Indianapolis Colts where they had 0 punts and 0 turnovers in a game, and that was in 227 starts. One time in 227 starts of Peyton Manning did the Colts have 0 punts and 0 turnovers. So far in Daniel Jones' tenure in Indianapolis, they have had 2 starts out of 2 where Daniel Jones has led the Colts to have 0 punts and 0 turnovers in a game. Very, very impressive. And that's obviously an impressive metric for the entire offense. That's something that the entire offensive staff there with the Colts can be proud of. The Colts also became the first team in the Super Bowl era to not punt in either of their first 2 games of a season. Credit to Adam Schefter on that stat. The Colts are also 2-0 for the first time since 2009 with a favorable schedule coming up. I'm so happy for Daniel Jones. He deserves all of this success more than anyone. I've stayed by him every step of the way. As I've always said, he was not the issue in New York. The Giants just did not surround him well enough. And now you can see he leaves the Giants, and he's had a very good start to his year away from the Giants. You look at Saquon Barkley, left the Giants, and then was almost the MVP of the league last year and Offensive Player of the Year, which Saquon did win the Offensive Player of the Year for 2024. So he's had a great time away from the Giants, it looks like. And then you look at Xavier McKinney as well. He had a lot of success last year, having a career year in interceptions away from the Giants. So I said to some of my friends after week 1 that if you want to get better, you either play against the Giants, or if you were a player for the Giants, you leave the Giants and you'll have more success elsewhere, which is tough because those are 3 guys right there, McKinney, Barkley, and Jones, who were all core pieces to the Giants at one point that leave and so far have had a lot more success away from the Giants than they had with the Giants. And I said in 2022 that when Daniel Jones was getting criticized a lot before that playoff run that the Giants had in the 2022 season, so it was probably just after the 2021 season ended, I said the Giants did not support Daniel Jones well enough in that one day he would leave the Giants and win 2 Super Bowls for the Raiders, just like Jim Plunkett left the Patriots and then won 2 Super Bowls for the Raiders. Plunkett was a top pick that was forced out of town by Patriots fans, and then he ended up winning Super Bowls for the Raiders. I still believe Daniel Jones is a Super Bowl winning quarterback. I know a lot of people will disagree with me, and that's fine. My stance has never wavered on that, though. I still have full faith in Daniel Jones to potentially win a Super Bowl one day. Anyways, very happy to see him having a lot of success, and I'm hoping the Colts continue to win ball games. I hope he continues to put up big numbers as well, because as I said, Daniel Jones deserves this recognition and this praise and this respect more than anyone. Now moving on to the Giants, had a really tough loss in overtime to the Cowboys last week. They lost that game 40-37. It was an absolute thriller. The Giants end up falling to 0-2 for the 10th time in the last 13 seasons. So that's something that we've been very used to, is being 0-2 after the first 2 weeks of the year. The Giants have not beaten Dak Prescott since 2016. They've not beaten the Cowboys since 2020. Russell Wilson, a positive of the game, looked like the Russell Wilson of old for a lot of that game. Looked like the Seattle Seahawks MVP candidate, Russell Wilson. Deep passing was A1 from Russell Wilson in this game. 7 of 11 on deep shots, 264 yards passing, 3 touchdowns and an interception on deep passes. His 264 yards on deep passes was the most in a game in the Next Gen Stats era, which is stats that have been compiled since 2016. He finished the game 30 of 41 passing, 450 passing yards, 3 touchdown passes, an interception, and a 123.5 quarterback rating. At the end of the day, he had an issue in overtime and also had a backwards pass in overtime as well that basically killed a Giants drive and then had that turnover in that next drive on that interception. So 2 tough drives in overtime for Russell Wilson and the Giants, which will kind of overshadow his great performance. Heading into week 3, though, Russell Wilson and Daniel Jones were the top 2 quarterbacks in the NFL in passing yards. Now Josh Allen is number 1 after playing a 3rd game on Thursday Night Football. Penalties were a major issue for the Giants in this game. They were flagged 21 times, with James Hudson, who started at left tackle in this game. He was penalized 4 times in the same drive, the first offensive drive of the game for the Giants. The Giants, as I said, flagged 21 times. 14 of those were accepted penalties for 160 penalty yards. That's the most penalty yards by the Giants this century, per a stat from Jordan Renan. Hudson became the first player since at least 2000 to be penalized 4 times on the same drive. He had 2 false starts and 2 unnecessary roughness penalties. After that happened, Marcus Bowe stepped in very well, a rookie tackle who showed a lot of potential stepping in. He was serviceable for the Giants after replacing Hudson. The red zone has continued to be an issue for the Giants. They were 1 of 7 on scoring touchdowns through the first 2 weeks of the season in the red zone. So just 14% of their red zone drives that they scored a touchdown in so far to begin the year, which is 2nd worst in the NFL through 2 weeks. Mike Kafka and Brian Daboll need to draw up better plays when the Giants get down there in the red zone. Field goals are not going to win games. With that being said, Graham Gano has been awesome this year to help the Giants out, kicking field goals. Good to see him back for the Giants. The Giants have not had any luck from opposing kickers in big-time moments over the last few years. And last week was nothing different. The Giants ended up giving up a field goal, 64-yard field goal to Brandon Aubrey as time expired at the end of regulation to send the game to overtime. In NFL history, on 60-plus yard field goals in the fourth quarter as time expires, opponents that are playing the New York Giants are 3 of 3, with all 3 of those 60-plus yard field goals as time expires at the end of regulation being since 2017. 3 of 3 have all happened since 2017. And then opponents versus the rest of the NFL are 3 of 41 on 60-plus yard field goals in the fourth quarter as time expires in NFL history. So 3 of 3 against the Giants teams are, and then not against the Giants, 3 of 41, which is really crazy. It just shows that the Giants have just not had luck in some of these close games over the last few years. With that being said, the Giants really hurt themselves in this game with the penalties. Add in the Giants' offense in overtime, having 2 wasted possessions, ditching the run game for the most part in some of those sequences, which led to them losing as well. Shane Bowen's defense and what he was calling for, coverage-wise, that was an issue as well to end regulation. The Giants were playing prevent defense essentially and giving Dallas 20 to 25-yard cushions with under 20 seconds to go, which basically allowed them to basically chip away with timeouts, get the ball downfield, and then set themselves up for a game-tying field goal to send the game to overtime, which, as I said, Brandon Aubrey kicked a 64-yarder. The Giants' defensive line did show potential again with what they can be, but the problem is the Giants have to blitz a lot to still get this pressure, which is an issue, especially considering the Giants' linebackers are not great in coverage, and then their secondary has some issues as well. I think Cordell Flott played awesome in this game. I was pleased with him and the way he's looked in the secondary to begin the season. He should get more snaps over Deonte Banks. Deonte Banks just plays with no effort, it seems like. He's a guy that if the Giants didn't take him as a first-round pick and he was a second- or third-round pick, I think they would have moved on from him by now. But as I mentioned, they did show promise, that defensive line. 25 pressures, 18 hurries, and 3 sacks. Kayvon Thibodeau has looked really good to begin the year. I think besides Brian Burns, he's been the best player on the defense for the Giants. He looks like the player that the Giants drafted him to be with the 5th overall pick. He is so much quicker and so much smoother this year with this pass rushing arsenal, which is awesome to see. Some positives other than that were Russell Wilson. He looked great, and his connection with Wanda Robinson and Malik Neighbors. Somehow Malik Neighbors, that catch he made, that 48-yard touchdown pass he had with 33 seconds left, somehow he made that play, even with his eyes being covered by the defensive back, somehow just put his hands out and made a spectacular play. Neighbors is so special. As I said before the year began, he's a top 3 wide receiver in the game, and I'm confident in saying that. In my opinion, I would take Jamar Chase, and then Malik Neighbors is the second best wide receiver in the NFL, in my opinion. I felt that way before the year began, and he's now just validating that even more game by game and play by play. Neighbors has the most catches in NFL history through the first 17 career games since 1970 with 123. Odell Beckham Jr. was the previous leader with 122, and then Brock Bowers is in third place with 112. Neighbors finished Sunday of last week with 9 catches for 167 yards and 2 touchdowns. Wanda Robinson also had a great game, 8 catches for 142 yards and a touchdown. He had a few long receptions, which he has showcased his big playability to begin the year with a lot of downfield plays, which the Giants have never really unlocked in his career so far. It could have just been that Dallas's secondary is weak, obviously, with Deron Bland being out last week, and then Trayvon Diggs still kind of recovering from that injury he had a couple years ago. He has not looked the same. But maybe a deep shot every now and then to Wan'Dale Robinson can open up this offense, especially considering they haven't really played Jalen Hyatt at all. Surprised he hasn't been cut yet because he just hasn't been getting any opportunities. Maybe they're waiting to try to trade him somewhere, but Hyatt has gotten no opportunities so far to begin the year. But Wan'Dale's a guy that maybe could be something that they take a deep shot to every now and then. Another guy that looked good in this game was Kim Scadaboo, who had 11 carries, 45 yards, and a touchdown. I think he's going to be the Giants' RB1, but I worry about him getting hurt with the way he runs. I said it before the year began. I thought he would take over by week 7 or week 8 and be that leading rusher for the Giants, and that's the way it looks right now. I like Tyrone Tracy a lot, but Cam Scadaboo, hard, bruising running back who I think fits this Giants mold. They were looking for guys in the draft that were hard-nosed, tough players that look for contact and unafraid, to give it their all each and every play. And Scadaboo is exactly that. He fits that Giants identity with what they were trying to do in the draft. As I said, drafting hard-nosed football players who give it their all and play physically. And he does that every single play. He's going to give you it his all and is never afraid of making contact with the defender. With that being said, as I said, I like Tyrone Tracy as well, but I think Scadaboo ends up being the lead back. And I said that before the year began as well. As for Dallas, Dak played well in this game. Prescott went 38 of 52 passing with 361 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, an interception, and a rushing touchdown. The Cowboys were very beatable in this game, though. The Giants had their chances, but credit to Dallas, they found a way to win. Moving on now to the Cincinnati Bengals. They defeated the Jacksonville Jaguars 31-27, but they did lose Joe Burrow for 3 months. Burrow ended up having a grade 3 turf toe injury, which is going to cost him 3 months, which is a big, big loss for that Bengals team. Jake Browning stepped in after Burrow got hurt, threw for 241 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, but also did throw 3 interceptions. He did add in a rushing touchdown, so overall, Browning had 3 total touchdowns and 3 turnovers. But that's not going to win you games in the NFL. They need to protect the ball better. He needs to obviously limit the turnovers. Luckily, the Bengals are 2-0 right now. If they can maybe go 5-5, 5-6, if Burrow misses 10 or 11 games, and let's say they're 7-5 or 7-6 when Burrow returns, that's the best case scenario, which I think is possible. I would not give up on the Bengals season right now where they stand. I think there's a potential chance they trade for a guy like Jameis Winston or maybe Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is tough to trade for because he has a big-time contract, and I know the Bengals probably wouldn't want to take on some of his money, so Atlanta would have to chew probably a good amount of that money in order to make a trade happen. But I do think Kirk Cousins still has some left in the tank. I wouldn't mind see the Bengals trading for him. I think he'd be really good in that offense. An issue for that Bengals team, though, is their offensive line. In Pass Pro ranks, in pass block win rate since drafting Joe Burrow, and this is a stat from ESPN, they ranked 29th in pass block win rate in 2020, 30th in 2021, 30th in 2022, 27th in 2023, 32nd in 2024, and 28th in 2025. That's a big issue for Burrow here, is that they've never really given him enough protection and obviously have not tried to keep him upright, especially considering that they've been bottom 5 in pass block win rate in all 6 years since Burrow has been drafted, which is very disappointing. You really need to address the offensive line just to not only keep him healthy, but give the offense a chance to score points. Burrow has battled injuries his entire time in Cincinnati. In 2020, he tore his ACL and meniscus, missed the rest of his rookie year. 2021, he had a dislocated pinky. 2022, he had an MCL sprain. 2023, he had a torn ligament in his wrist, which caused him to miss the rest of the year. And now in 2025, a grade 3 turf toe injury, and he's going to be out 3 months. All of those injuries and that breakdown was from a tweet by Ari Myrov. But this team needs to start addressing that offensive line. You need to keep Joe Burrow upright and try to keep him healthy. I know a lot of people are making comparisons to Andrew Luck and how many times he was hit and how the Colts, for the most part, never really want to address the offensive line and keep him upright. And it's somewhat similar with Joe Burrow, where they're not giving him enough protection, and at the end of the day, it's costing him, games obviously missed, and it's costing the team points as well on the board when Burrow doesn't have enough time to look downfield. And a crazy statistic I saw from CBS Sports is that for a quarterback that has started 70 games in the last 20 seasons, the most quarterback hits taken per start is Daniel Jones with 7.0 per start on average quarterback hits. Andrew Luck with 6.8 is second, tied with Carson Wentz. Deshaun Watson in fourth with 6.6. And then Joe Burrow, an average of 6.5 quarterback hits taken per start, which, as I said, is fifth on that list among quarterbacks in the last 20 seasons with a minimum of 70 starts, which that obviously validates my opinion and everything I've said about Daniel Jones as well so far in this episode, is that he was never really given enough help with the Giants. They never really addressed that offensive line, and also with just a rotating door of offensive coordinators and head coaches and trying to just figure out a makeshift offensive line every year, which has never really helped any quarterback, especially Daniel Jones in that offense. He never really had the help he needed in New York. Now you see him with a better offensive line in Indianapolis and then a better play call in Shane Steichen, who's playing to his strengths. Jones has had an awesome year. And another stat I want to mention here, which I know this is now a little bit off topic since I already talked about Daniel Jones earlier, but so far through the NFL season, through 2 weeks, the highest scoring drive rate in the NFL, and this comes from a stat from Pro Football Focus, is the Indianapolis Colts. And this excludes drives at the end of the half and end of game drives. But Daniel Jones and the Indianapolis Colts have scored an 87.5 of their drives to begin the season, which is number one in the NFL through 2 weeks. Buffalo through 2 weeks was 66.7% in second place. Baltimore at 59.1% in third place. Jacksonville and Dallas right around 57% in fourth and fifth place. So The Colts have been a very efficient offense with Daniel Jones, giving him time to throw, which is very important in playing to his strengths. And having some time to throw and having a better offensive line has really helped Daniel Jones. And now you obviously see what he can do with a better offensive line. And I think the similar thing with Joe Burrow is, and the same thing with Andrew Luck, Daniel Jones, and the rest of those guys I mentioned on that list earlier, were that they just get hit so much because the offensive lines around them were never addressed by their respective teams. And that obviously is not only going to hurt the quarterback's stats, but also going to hurt them health-wise as well and put them at risk of getting hurt. And now you see just another year where Joe Burrow is getting hurt. And I don't want this to be a what-if story with Joe Burrow. I think he's the best quarterback in the NFL, and he's fully locked in and is fully healthy. But obviously now we won't see that this year. And my quarterback predictions before the year began with Joe Burrow being number one, his stats are not going to be looking number one anymore with him missing 3 weeks, unfortunately. But I'm hoping the Bengals are in a position to still compete for a playoff spot when he gets back and make things interesting sometime in late November, early December, if that's when he returns. In that game, Trevor Lawrence against the Bengals went 24 of 42 passing, 271 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. Tough loss for the Jaguars here, but they had their chances to win this one. They were up 27-24 heading into the fourth quarter, but ended up finding a way to lose that game in the last minute. Brian Thomas Jr. only has 5 catches for 60 yards to begin the year. Does have a rushing touchdown to begin the season, though. He had one last week. For some reason, he has not clicked with Trevor Lawrence to begin this season. Even missed a touchdown over the middle where it was a catchable ball that he would have made last year for sure if it was Lawrence or even Mac Jones throwing to him. But for some reason this year, he just hasn't really been clicking with Lawrence so far. Hopefully their connection recovers because I think Brian Thomas Jr. has the ability to be a top 5 to 7 receiver in the game. Now moving on to the Kansas City Chiefs, who lost last week 20-17 to the Philadelphia Eagles. The Chiefs fall to 0-2 for the first time in the Patrick Mahomes era. Hurts threw for just 101 passing yards in this game on 15 completions, added in 15 rushing yards on 9 attempts and a rushing touchdown. Was not the best game for Hurts or the Eagles offense, but it was enough to win. Hurts to begin the year has not really been passing too much. That's why A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith haven't really put up big numbers to begin the year receiving-wise. Neither one have really done too much. Hurts has been kind of a game manager. I mean, last week I didn't watch too much of that game, but from what I saw, he was just managing the game, run when he had to, not make a turnover, and just, try to find a way to control that game and keep the ball in Philadelphia's hands, which the Kansas City Chiefs had a chance to, somewhat win that game, but I think with all their injuries, Xavier Worthy being hurt, Rashee Rice being out, Mahomes just doesn't have the playmakers. Pacheco does not look the same after coming back from that leg injury from last year. He looks like he's past his prime. The way he's been running looks just a little bit slower than he did last year. And then Travis Kelce is past his prime as well. So Mahomes really doesn't have enough talent around him. And I think that's part of the reason Mahomes hasn't put up the numbers he's been putting up, 2-3 years ago when he had Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce in their primes. I've been a little bit down on Mahomes because I think there were a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL that are putting up better numbers than him. And I know for 2 or 3 years, Mahomes was top in the NFL, top 5 in passing yards and completions and touchdowns. But the last couple of seasons, he hasn't really been able to do that. And without Tyreek Hill and a legitimate, certified deep threat every single game, he hasn't been putting up those big numbers. And I think that's a worry for Mahomes. And that's a worry for me, and that's why I had him outside my top 3 when I did my quarterback rankings to begin the year, is that he hasn't been putting up those big-time numbers because some of the other quarterbacks around him have elevated their game and, put up some bigger numbers like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jordan Love even 2 years ago put up bigger numbers than Mahomes. And I know it's not always about numbers because Mahomes not only won a Super Bowl 2 years ago, but went to the Super Bowl last year. So numbers don't always tell the whole story, and you'd rather throw for 20 touchdowns and win a Super Bowl than throw for 45 and not win a Super Bowl. So I understand that at the end of the day, but the Chiefs have struggled to begin the season. In that game against the Eagles, Mahomes only threw for 187 passing yards with a passing touchdown and an interception. Did run very well in this game, 7 carries for 66 yards and a touchdown on the ground. It is clear, though, the Chiefs need a number 1 wide receiver, whether that's Worthy when he comes back healthy or Rashee Rice. They need a number 1 weapon for Mahomes. The issue is that Travis Kelce, as I mentioned, is past his prime. Pacheco has not looked good since returning from his injury from last season. And other quarterbacks in the league have been elevating some of their players around them a little bit better than Mahomes has in the last couple seasons. And I know there are some quarterbacks with better situations and better weapons. I understand that. Like Tua Tagovailoa has Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and Devon Achane, which is more weapons than Mahomes has right now. So I understand that Mahomes doesn't have the best of weapons. But I do feel like Mahomes just hasn't been putting up the numbers he did 2 or 3 years ago. And I think the numbers, when you look at it, kind of back up that opinion. And that's why I'm a little bit worried about Mahomes. He hasn't been putting up, as many bigger passing stat lines the last couple seasons. We'll see what he has in store tonight for the Giants. The Chiefs are 0-2. They travel to MetLife Stadium tonight to face the New York Giants on Sunday Night Football. I don't expect the Chiefs to go 0-3 since I think that would be tough for the NFL and their ratings. As I said before the season began, I expected them to take a step back, but somewhat sneak in the playoffs. I think the Giants, they have what it takes to potentially beat the Chiefs tonight. I don't think the Chiefs are an unbeatable team. They're more vulnerable now than they've ever been, so I think they're definitely beatable. And obviously, Philadelphia took advantage of them last week, winning a low-scoring game, which before that game, you would have thought it would be a high-scoring shootout potentially, with Hurts and Mahomes going at it. But Mahomes didn't put up great numbers. Hurts didn't even need to do too much in that game, kind of just game managed in that one and didn't really throw the ball too much downfield, which is somewhat of a worry for me as well. That's why I had Hurts a little bit lower in my rankings because I was worried about him heading into the year passing the ball just because it seems like they rely on the run game so much on that team that I didn't expect him to put up big passing numbers, which I definitely did value a lot in my quarterback rankings. I was valuing how many passing yards and how many passing touchdowns a quarterback would throw for, especially considering their circumstances. So like I mentioned, let's say Bryce Young, if he threw 25 touchdowns with his receivers and then Tua Tagovailoa threw 35 with Hill and Waddle and Achane, I think Bryce Young's 25 touchdown passes would be more impressive, and that was something I definitely valued in there was total stats, and then also total stats in respect to their team situation and what they have around them. So I definitely valued that a lot. That's why I had Hurts a little bit lower on my list because I didn't really expect him to have as many passing touchdowns as some of those guys above him, and obviously we've seen Hurts take advantage of teams with his feet and, running the ball a lot. And especially with an offense that includes Saquon Barkley, it makes sense that they're going to be very run heavy. And that's why he hasn't really had to do too much. It's kind of game managing where he can just kind of see what the game needs. If he has to throw downfield, he can. But if all he has to do is run the ball, not turn the ball over, and that's how they beat the Chiefs, that obviously does the trick, and he didn't even have a big-time game on the ground. Neither did Saquon, but the Chiefs just obviously have not been as great as they've been in years past, so the Eagles didn't need to have a 35-point game to win that one, and that was evident. They won that game, as I said, 20-17. So they will be facing the New York Giants tonight, the Kansas City Chiefs. As I said, they're 0-2 to begin the year. I do not expect them to go 0-3, to be honest. We'll see how things go, but I don't expect the NFL to want them to go 0-3. I think they still will be a playoff team and sneak in at 9-8. But I guess you never know how things work out. For the New York Giants, though, they need to see some improvement from the offensive line. Andrew Thomas is supposed to be back tonight and starting at left tackle, which would be huge for this team because if you look at the stats that the Giants have when Thomas plays versus when he doesn't play, it's night and day. The Giants are a much better team. They score a lot more points and have a better chance of winning when Thomas is on the field in his career for the Giants. And then you look at some other guys that need to step up. I want to see something out of Dexter Lawrence, and I know he's been getting double teamed, and that's been a problem for him is that he hasn't really had as much of an effect on any of the games so far to begin the year. Hopefully he has a big moment tonight, maybe a big strip sack or something, or a big run-stopping play on fourth down and short. That would be nice to see. And I'm hoping to see a big play out of Kayvon Thibodeau. He has looked awesome to begin the year, and I think he's the second best player on the Giants defense so far. And I think he has, honestly, a really high ceiling as well. I think Thibodeau, he could end up having more sacks than Brian Burns to end the season. I know Burns has had a great year to begin the year, but the way Thibodeau has looked to begin the season, very smooth, quick, getting around the edge, using his hands right. He has been awesome to begin the year. Hopefully he has a big game tonight for the Giants on Sunday Night Football. One thing to note is the Giants almost beat the Chiefs. It was a Monday Night Football game, if I remember correctly. Back in 2021, they lost that game 20-17 on the road to Kansas City. Kansas City was 3-4 heading into that game. The Giants were 2-5. The Giants definitely had a chance to win that one. They were right in the game at the end, losing that one, as I said, by a field goal, but the Giants are right there. We'll see what they do tonight. As I mentioned, this is a big game for the Giants. If you go 0-3, it's going to be really tough, either team. If you go 0-3, it's kind of saying you're not going to make the playoffs. I mean, you still could technically make the playoffs at 0-3, and I know the NFL would love to see a story where a team, let's say like the Chiefs, they go 0-3 and then somehow make a run and make the playoffs. It would add to the drama and the storylines in the NFL. I don't think the NFL would want the Chiefs to go 0-3 just because if Mahomes and the Chiefs are 1-2, they're still in the mix in the playoffs. And you go 0-3, you're in a really tough spot, and you kind of have to figure things out very quick because the season does go by very fast. So that's something that if either team loses, they're going to have to get back on track very quick. Brian Daboll and the Giants executive staff, including the GM, Schoen, this is a make-or-break season for them, I feel like. So I think at some point, they're going to have to start winning games or they're going to get moved on from. And I think with Brian Daboll, we've had a lot of the same issues in recent years where we're losing games because of the points we give up at the end of each half. And we're also struggling with the offensive line still an issue. Poor tackling. The defensive play calling by Shane Bowen the last couple of years has been bad. It's like the Giants have had the same issues in recent years. And it just worries me that they know Andrew Thomas is an injury-prone tackle. And when he's playing, he's one of the best in the game. But Andrew Thomas has shown that he really can't stay healthy, unfortunately. And it's important to have a backup that can play and replace him and give you some serviceable reps. The Giants the last few years really haven't had that. James Hudson III started 2 games to begin the year and struggled in each of those 2 games. And luckily, Marcus Bowe stepped in last week and was good. But I wish the Giants addressed the backup tackle position more than they have in the last few years because it's so important to have a backup that's ready to go and that's serviceable because when Thomas goes down and he's out, the Giants struggle, and we've seen that in recent years. But Brian Daboll is on the hot seat, I would say, and I think Joe Schoen as well. We only had 1 winning season so far with them in 4 years. With a really bad division record, the Giants are just 3-16-1 in the division since the start of 2022, 18-34-1 overall in the Schoen and Daboll era, which is disappointing because it started out with so much promise, but that's just the way sports go. You have a really good start, and things look very promising, and everyone's upbeat, and then things can fall apart even quicker than that, where people forget the success you had in the past because of your current and obviously long-term struggles. It seems like for the Giants, the last 2 or 3 years, it's the same recurring struggles and the same recurring issues that they've had, like the offensive line, poor tackling, penalties have been issues at times, and then obviously just bad play calling defensively. Like they've had the same issues in recent years, and just things have not gotten better necessarily. So that's why Schoen and Daboll are on the hot seat. They're playing for their jobs right now. They need to obviously win some ball games. I think that's why Russell Wilson, even though he played great last week, if things go south a little bit more in the Giants, let's say 1-4, 1-5 after week 5, week 6, Jackson Dott's going to get himself some opportunities because that might buy Daboll and Schoen some more time when it comes to an evaluation standpoint from ownership. Ownership might say, okay, we'll see how Jackson Dott does, and if he ends up playing well, maybe the Giants have found their new franchise quarterback, which me personally, I'm very high on Jackson Dott, but maybe that could potentially buy Schoen and Daboll more time just to wait and see how Dott plays out. Dott plays well, maybe it could be a spark to the team. They end up going on a run and winning some ball games, and maybe that could potentially preserve their jobs. We'll see how things play out. The Giants are 2-8 in the Brian Daboll era in primetime games, which is obviously concerning. They have not been able to be competitive in some of these primetime games. And you also add in, since the Giants won the Super Bowl in 2012, the Giants are 14-39 in primetime games. And that's obviously disappointing and concerning because they're going to get a lot of primetime games just because they're New York and obviously a big-time franchise, and that's the sports media capital of the world there in New York City. But it's concerning. They haven't been competitive in primetime games, and the entire country's watching you struggle, which is tough to see. And I saw a stat from ESPN today. The Giants are like 1-18 or 2-18 over the last 20 primetime games, if I remember correctly, which is very disappointing. Hopefully, the luck changes tonight. They find a way to win. We'll see how things play out. Anyways, that'll wrap up this episode. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to this. As always, we appreciate it. Hope you guys have a good one. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you.